lecture video is going to go over the overall anatomy of the nervous system, so just in general, the organs and the tubes and the vessels that are involved, and then look specifically at the anatomy of the kidneys, each one of those organs. So we're going to start with just looking at overall anatomy, and these diagrams should be attached online so that you can print them out and follow along if you so choose. We're going to start here with the kidneys. So you have these two oval-shaped organs that are located kind of in your back. These are going to be the organs that are going to be responsible for basically cleaning out your blood and producing urine. So you have two kidneys. You can live with only one, but you cannot live with no kidneys. You have to have at least one kidney in terms of survival. As you're going to see, as the next couple weeks go on, your kidneys are incredibly important in terms of their job affects so many other systems. And so when kidney disruption occurs, there's just so many other systems of the body that are going to feel the effects of that, and they're just a really, really important organ in maintaining homeostasis. So because the kidney's job is to kind of filter blood, to filter out waste products in blood, and then also to put the things that we want in blood back into blood, blood has to enter into the kidneys, and it does that through a renal artery. So that's why I have it colored here in red. So there's a renal artery that will branch into both kidneys. Now, once that blood enters into the kidney and it'll get filtered and substances will get reabsorbed and things will get put back in and urine will be produced, the clean blood needs to exit the kidney, and it will do so through the renal vein. So again, each kidney will have a branch of the renal vein that will bring the clean blood back to the rest of the body. Now, as I mentioned, the kidneys are responsible for making urine. So once that urine production is done, we want to get the urine out of the body because urine is basically metabolic waste and combination of water. And so it will carry the urine down two tubes, which are called the ureters. And again, there is a ureter that comes from each kidney. So you have two ureters. Those ureters will carry the urine down into the urinary bladder, okay, which is going to be down here. It's a storage compartment for urine, so urine will be stored there until the nervous system tells the body to release that urine down and out the body through a tube called the urethra, and we talked about the urethra during reproduction. So the urethra will carry the urine stored in the bladder out. So those are kind of the overall structures that are involved in our urinary system. The arteries bring blood in to the kidneys. The kidneys will change and modify that blood, taking things out that we don't want, putting things back in that we do want. Clean blood will exit out the renal vein. Urine will be produced in the kidneys with the metabolic waste products. That urine will be carried down through the ureters to the urinary bladder, which will store that urine until a time when we feel the need to urinate, in which case a sphincter here will open and the urine will be released through the urethra. So that's overall anatomy. Let's look specifically at the parts of a kidney. So again, this diagram should be attached. You can use it as you want to. And we're going to start with the very outside. So there's a protective layer that's found on the very outside of the kidneys, and its job is just that. It's a protective layer. It helps protect the kidneys. Your kidneys, if there is damage to the kidneys, again, because it plays such an important role in homeostasis, any kind of damage to the kidney can be really, really detrimental to our overall health. So this structure here, this outer covering, is going to be called the renal capsule. Renal capsule. And again, it just serves as a protective coating. Then, as you work your way inside to the kidney, we divide the kidney into kind of two parts. There's an outer layer, and then there's an inner layer. So we'll start with the outer layer. The outer layer is going to be all of this right here. And we call this outer layer the renal cortex. And the renal cortex is going to contain the nephrons, the Bowman capsules, and the collecting ducts of the nephrons. And we'll talk about the nephrons in the next lecture video. But it's the outer part of the kidney. The inner part, which if you look would be kind of this, sections in here. So we'll kind of color them here in red. These are called the renal medulla. The renal medulla. So that's the innermost part of the kidney. Now your renal medulla is going to be made up of these sections, and these sections then are called renal pyramids. So these renal pyramids, so a renal pyramid would kind of be this right there, right? This whole structure right here. So each individual unit is a renal pyramid, but all of them combined make up your renal medulla. Now at the very tip here, so let's kind of put it right here. This end, the end that's kind of closest to the inside of the kidney, this part of a renal pyramid is called your renal papillae. And this is going to be where urine is made by your nephrons, and that will then get transferred to the calyx, which is going to be the next structure that we're kind of going to look at. Before we get into that part, I do want to kind of point out this area here. So I don't know, we might want to color it just a little bit darker. But basically these gaps between the cortex and the medulla, those are going to be called the renal columns. Now let's look at the calyx. So the calyx, if you look here, we got all of these different branches that are occurring. So actually, before we get to the renal calyx, let's just color quickly the renal artery. So this would be the renal artery. So we talked about that in the other diagram. Okay, so here's the renal artery. And you can see how the renal artery then branches to all parts of the kidney. So here's the renal artery. And remember that brings blood into the kidney. And then here's the renal vein. Now, there are these parts here in the middle that are also going to branch, and we call these calyx. And the calyx, their job is to receive urine from the papillae and process it and pass it on down until we get to our ureter. So we put the calyx into two categories. We have the major calyx, and then we have the minor calyx. So the major calyx, well, we'll start with the minor calyx actually. The minor calyx is going to be attached then to these renal papillae. So it would kind of be, if we were to draw it here, right here. This is a good one. Right, here's a calyx, a minor calyx. Here's a minor calyx. So the minor calyx are going to be directly connected to those medulla, the renal papillae of the medulla. Okay, here's another minor calyx. Now, they're all going to eventually branch into this big major one down here that's going to lead directly into the ureter. So we'll kind of make this one a little darker green. So it's the big, thick portion here that's going to lead to the ureter. So we'll label this one. You got an arrow that's pointing to it already. We'll label that the major calyx. So the minor calyx is going to receive the urine from the renal papillae. It will then deliver it to the major calyx, which will then deliver it to the ureter. And so we'll kind of put the ureter down here. Now, this whole section here is referred to, it's got the renal vein and the renal artery. This is called the renal hilum. And there's also a nerve that would be going in there as well. And then the last thing that I want to just kind of draw in here, because it's going to be important later, is that I want you to be able to see that these renal arteries, so let's say here's a renal artery, if we continued it on, these will kind of branch off here, okay? And same with the veins. So you're going to end up with renal arteries and renal veins that kind of are going to branch out here, and we call these the interlobular veins and the interlobular interlobular arteries. So those are the general parts of the kidney, parts that you need to know. The very outside, which is the renal capsule. Then you got the outside layer, which is the renal cortex. The inner layers, which is the renal medulla. The renal medulla is made up of individual renal pyramids. The very bottom of those pyramids are called renal papillae. They will lead to structures called minor calyx, which will collect the urine that's made, which leads to a major calyx, which leads to the ureter. And then we also have the renal vein and renal arteries that are bringing blood into and out of the kidney, and they eventually branch out into very small arteries and veins that surround the different pyramids and within the cortex that are called the interlobular veins and the interlobular arteries.